Hello guys, imagine the cold Roman ground beneath you as the last campfire slowly fades into the darkness. Your feet are sore after a long march, your armor rests beside you, and thousands of tired soldiers are settling down nearby. But how could a Roman soldier truly sleep when tomorrow might bring another 20 miles, or even a battle? Surprisingly, sleep was not simply rest. It was part of the discipline that kept Rome's armies moving. Before we continue, make yourself comfortable. Adjust your pillow, lower the lights, and allow the noise of the day to slowly drift away. If you enjoy calm, immersive stories from the ancient world, the kind that help you relax while quietly learning something new, consider subscribing. That way, whenever night arrives, another peaceful journey through history will be waiting for you. Now, as your room becomes quieter, imagine the distant rhythm of Roman sandals crossing the darkening landscape, and follow the army toward its camp. By the time the Roman army began looking for a place to stop, the sun was already moving lower across the sky. You had been walking for hours. Your sandals were coated with pale dust. Your shoulders ached beneath the weight of your equipment, and each step felt slightly heavier than the one before. The road behind you stretched into the distance, marked by thousands of footprints, wagon tracks, and the slow movement of animals carrying supplies. But even now, with evening approaching, you were not yet thinking about sleep. Not really, because a Roman soldier's day did not end when the marching stopped. It only changed shape. Ahead, the officers had chosen a suitable place for the night. Perhaps it was a broad piece of open ground near a source of water. Perhaps it stood on slightly higher land, where rain would be less likely to collect beneath the tents. The army needed space, not only for thousands of soldiers, but also for horses, pack animals, wagons, equipment, cooking fires, and the carefully organized rows that would soon become a temporary Roman town. To a modern traveler, the idea might sound exhausting. After walking many miles, most of us would probably look for the nearest comfortable bed, remove our shoes, and decide that tomorrow's problems could wait until tomorrow. A Roman soldier had no such luxury. Before anyone could sleep, the camp had to be built. And that meant more work. The army slowed as the marching columns reached the chosen ground. Orders passed from one group to another. Soldiers moved into their assigned areas, and the familiar rhythm of the march gradually disappeared. In its place came the sounds of preparation. Tools struck the earth. Wooden stakes were carried into position. Men called to one another. Animals shifted and snorted nearby. Somewhere, metal equipment knocked softly together as soldiers removed their heavy loads. The Roman army was famous for its discipline, and that discipline continued even when the soldiers were tired. A marching camp was not simply a collection of tents scattered across a field. It was carefully planned and organized. The Romans often constructed defensive boundaries around their camps, helping protect the army while it rested. The exact details could vary depending on the terrain, the size of the force, and the situation. Ancient sources describe the Roman camp as an orderly place, but historians still debate how consistently every army followed the ideal layout during difficult campaigns. A hurried camp in hostile territory may not have looked exactly like the neat diagrams found in military descriptions. Still, the basic idea remained clear. Sleep was safer when the army was organized. And organization required effort. So you lifted your tools. Your tired arms returned to work. The earth beneath your feet, warm from the afternoon sun, slowly began to cool as evening approached. Dust clung to your skin. Sweat dried beneath your tunic, leaving behind a faint, uncomfortable stiffness. You might have wished for a warm bath, a soft mattress, and a quiet room. Instead, you had a shovel. The Romans had a practical relationship with comfort. They appreciated it when they found it, certainly, but they did not expect it to follow them across mountains, forests, rivers, and distant provinces. The camp was their temporary shelter. The army itself was their moving home. And the men around you were the people with whom you would share the night. As the work continued, the sky changed gradually. The bright afternoon light softened into gold. Long shadows stretched across the ground. The distant landscape became quieter, although the camp itself grew busier. Smoke began to rise from the first cooking fires. The smell of food drifted through the air, mixing with dust, leather, wood, sweat, and the faint scent of animals. Roman soldiers carried much of what they needed with them. Their equipment could include weapons, armor, tools, cooking items, and personal belongings. The exact weight and arrangement changed over time, and ancient accounts sometimes make the Roman soldier seem almost unbelievably burdened. Modern historians continue to discuss how much equipment was carried during different periods and campaigns. Whatever the precise number, the load was not light. And after carrying it for hours, you would probably feel every strap. Your shoulders might be sore where leather rubbed against your skin. Your feet could be swollen inside your sandals. A small stone caught beneath the sole might have become irritating long before the day was over. Yet you continued. Because everyone else continued too. That was one of the quiet strengths of a Roman army. A soldier did not march alone. He moved within a system of shared routines. Thousands of people performed familiar tasks at roughly the same time. The work was difficult, but it was predictable. March. Stop. Build. Eat. Rest. Wake. March again. Over time, the repetition may have created its own strange sense of comfort. You knew what came next. Even when the landscape changed, the routine remained. As darkness approached, the camp slowly began to take shape. The open ground that had seemed empty only a short time earlier was becoming a place of order. Paths appeared. Areas were assigned. Tents would soon rise. Guards would take their positions. And somewhere inside that growing camp, a small space waited for you. Not a private bedroom. Not a soft bed. Not a quiet place where you could close a door and forget the world. But a place where you could finally lie down. For now, however, the last light remained above the horizon. Your hands were still dusty. Your legs were still tired. And the evening had only begun. Soon, the soldiers would finish preparing their temporary home. Fires would glow between the tents. Food would be shared. Weapons and equipment would be placed nearby. The sounds of work would slowly become the quieter sounds of camp life. Then, at last, the Roman army would begin preparing for sleep. But before anyone could rest, the camp itself had to be made safe. And so, beneath the fading light of an ancient evening, you picked up your tools once more and continued working. As the sun sank lower, the Roman army continued working. You might have expected the soldiers to spread out their blankets and rest after a long march. But the open field around you was not yet a camp. Before anyone could sleep peacefully, it had to become a protected place. Roman soldiers were trained to build temporary camps with remarkable speed. Depending on the situation, they could dig defensive ditches, raise earthworks, and place wooden stakes around the camp. It was tiring work, especially after walking for hours. Your arms already felt heavy. Your feet were sore, and now you were digging. For a modern traveler, this might seem like a particularly unfair ending to a long hike. After carrying equipment all day, being handed a tool would probably not improve the mood. But the Romans understood something important. A tired army was vulnerable. While the soldiers slept, an enemy might approach. So the camp was designed to provide protection and order. The walls and ditches created a boundary between the resting army and the uncertain world outside. As you worked, the sounds around you slowly changed, the steady rhythm of tools striking the ground mixed with the voices of soldiers. Wooden stakes scraped against one another. Horses moved nearby, and somewhere beyond the camp, a wagon creaked as supplies were unloaded. The air was becoming cooler. A soft evening breeze carried away some of the heat left by the afternoon sun. Dust settled over your sandals, and the smell of fresh earth rose from the ground. At last, the work began to slow. The camp was taking shape. Paths separated different areas. Soldiers moved toward their assigned spaces. Officers and guards had their positions, while groups prepared to set up their tents. The Roman camp was more than a place to sleep. For one night, it became a small, organized city. And because the layout followed familiar patterns, a soldier could arrive in a new landscape and still know where to go. After days or weeks on campaign, that routine may have offered a quiet kind of comfort. The hills might be unfamiliar. The weather might change. Tomorrow's march might lead somewhere unknown. But the evening routine remained. Build the camp. Prepare the meal. Arrange your equipment. Rest when permitted. Then wake before dawn and begin again. Historians still debate how closely every temporary camp followed the ideal Roman design. Conditions were not always perfect. An army moving quickly, facing danger, or crossing difficult terrain may have adapted its camp to the situation. Still, Roman discipline made the camp one of the army's greatest strengths. As darkness slowly covered the landscape, the defensive work was finally coming to an end. You placed your tool aside. Your hands were dusty, and your shoulders felt stiff. But now, for the first time since the army had stopped, you could imagine lying down. Small fires began to glow between the tents. The smell of food drifted through the evening air. The loud sounds of construction became quieter conversations. And somewhere inside the newly built camp, a place was waiting for you. It was not soft. It was not private. And it was certainly not a Roman luxury villa. But after a long march and an evening of hard work, even a simple place on the ground could begin to feel almost comfortable. Soon, you would see where a Roman soldier actually slept, and what he used to make it through the cold, dark night. Now that the camp was secure, you could finally turn your attention toward the place where you would spend the night. But if you were imagining a soft bed, warm sheets, and a quiet room, the Roman army had a small disappointment waiting for you. Your sleeping place was likely inside a shared leather tent. Roman soldiers did not usually sleep alone. A group of men could share the same shelter, resting close together with their equipment nearby. The space was practical rather than private. There was little room for comfort, and even less room for personal space. After a long day, however, privacy may not have been your greatest concern. You were tired. The ground beneath the tent was hard and uneven. A blanket or cloak might provide some protection from the cold, but it could not turn the earth into a comfortable mattress. Small stones, rough grass, and patches of damp soil had a way of making themselves noticeable just when you were trying to sleep. You might spend a few minutes adjusting your cloak. Then adjust it again. Then discover that the uncomfortable stone had somehow moved to a different part of your back. Modern campers may recognize this ancient problem. Some things do not change very much. The tent offered protection from wind and light rain, but it was not completely sealed. Cold air could still enter, and the sounds of the camp remained close. Outside, soldiers talked quietly near the fires. Horses shifted in the darkness. Leather straps creaked. Footsteps passed along the camp paths. And somewhere nearby, one exhausted soldier had already begun snoring. Perhaps you knew him. Perhaps you had marched beside him for weeks. Perhaps you had quietly hoped that tonight he would be too tired to make any noise. Unfortunately, Roman discipline could organize an army, but it could not always control snoring. Your armor and weapons were kept nearby. A soldier needed to know where his equipment was, especially when the army was camped in uncertain territory. The familiar shape of a shield or helmet beside you may even have provided a strange sense of security. Everything had its place. The tent. The weapons. The soldiers. The camp. Outside, guards watched the darkness. Inside, you could finally allow your tired muscles to relax. The smell of leather surrounded you. Dust from the road still clung to your clothing, mixed with smoke from the evening fires. The air inside the tent grew warmer as the soldiers settled close together. It was not luxurious, but it was shelter. And after a day of marching, digging, and carrying equipment, shelter could feel like enough. Historians cannot know every detail of how every Roman soldier arranged his sleeping space. Conditions changed across centuries, regions, and military campaigns. Some nights may have been more comfortable than others. But the basic experience was probably familiar to many soldiers. You slept close to your companions. You kept your belongings nearby. You rested on the ground. Before the camp became quiet, there was one more important part of the evening. Food. After hours of marching, digging, carrying equipment, and preparing the camp, even a simple meal could feel deeply satisfying. Near the tents, small fires glowed against the growing darkness. The smoke rose slowly into the evening sky, carrying the warm smell of cooking grain, bread, and whatever food was available during the campaign. A Roman soldier's meal was usually practical rather than luxurious. There might be grain prepared as a simple porridge, bread, cheese, or preserved food. The exact meal could change depending on the time period, location, supplies, and the army's circumstances. A well-supplied camp might offer more variety, while a difficult campaign could make food much simpler. Tonight, though, you were probably not thinking like a food critic. You were hungry. You sat near the fire, holding your meal while the warmth reached your tired hands. Around you, soldiers spoke more quietly than they had during the march. Some talked about the road ahead. Others complained about sore feet. A few may have shared jokes that became much funnier simply because everyone was exhausted. After all, when you have marched all day and then spent the evening digging a defensive ditch, almost anything can seem amusing. The firelight moved across tired faces. Helmets and weapons rested nearby. Leather straps caught the orange glow. Beyond the circle of light, the camp slowly disappeared into darkness. For a short time, the soldiers could relax. The officers still gave orders. The guards still watched the camp, but many of the ordinary soldiers had a quiet moment to eat, talk, and recover from the day. Perhaps someone spoke about home. A family waiting in a distant town, A familiar street. Inside the tent, the evening was becoming quieter. The last conversations faded into low murmurs. One by one, the soldiers settled into their places, carefully arranging the few belongings they carried. But before you could lie down, your equipment needed to be close. A Roman soldier's weapons were not simply objects used during battle. They were part of daily military life. Your shield, helmet, and other equipment represented both your duty and your readiness. Even at night, they could not be forgotten. You placed your belongings where you could find them in the darkness. The camp was protected, and guards were watching outside, but armies could not assume that every night would remain peaceful. A sudden alarm might call the soldiers awake. And if that happened, there would be no time to search through the tent wondering where your sandals had disappeared. Modern people sometimes spend several minutes looking for a phone that is already in their hand. A Roman soldier had slightly more serious reasons to keep track of his belongings. The equipment around you made the tent feel crowded. Leather straps rested beside rolled cloaks. Weapons were placed within reach. The hard shape of a shield occupied part of the limited space, while helmets and personal items sat close to the sleeping soldiers. There was little room to stretch. If one man turned over, another might notice. If someone woke during the night, the quiet movement could disturb the others. And yet, after a long day, exhaustion often solved the problem of comfort. Your body was tired enough to accept almost any sleeping place. The ground remained firm beneath you. Your cloak provided only a thin layer between your body and the earth. The air inside the tent carried the familiar smell of leather, dust, smoke, and wool. Outside, the camp was slowly settling. The cooking fires had become smaller. The voices were softer. Only the occasional footsteps of a guard disturbed the quiet. You could hear the faint sound of metal when someone adjusted a piece of equipment. Somewhere nearby, an animal moved against its tether. Then the sounds became distant. The routine of the day had finally ended. You pulled your cloak closer and rested your head. For a moment, you might have thought about tomorrow. Another march. Another camp. Another long road. But there was little use worrying about it now. The Roman army depended on routine. Each soldier knew that morning would eventually return, bringing new orders and new word. For the moment, the camp was secure, your companions were nearby, and your equipment was exactly where it needed to be. That small sense of order may have made sleep easier. You closed your eyes. The hard ground did not become softer. The tent did not become larger. And the soldier beside you did not suddenly stop snoring. But your tired muscles slowly relaxed. Beyond the tent, the night deepened. The Roman camp rested beneath the stars. Almost everyone was asleep. Almost everyone, because while you settled beneath your cloak, other soldiers were preparing to remain awake. They would walk through the darkness, listen beyond the camp walls, and protect the thousands of men who had finally fallen asleep. The night watch had begun. While most of the Roman camp slowly drifted toward sleep, not everyone was allowed to rest. Outside the tents, the night watch had begun. A small group of soldiers remained awake, walking along the camp's paths and standing near important entrances. Their duty was simple to describe but difficult to perform. Stay alert. Listen carefully. And make sure the sleeping army remained safe until morning. You might hear their footsteps passing beyond the tent. Slow, steady, then gradually fading into the darkness. The guards carried the responsibility of watching over thousands of tired soldiers. Beyond the camp's defenses, the landscape was almost impossible to see. Trees became dark shapes. Hills disappeared beneath the night sky. Every unfamiliar sound seemed louder after sunset. A branch moving in the wind could sound like footsteps. An animal passing through the grass might make a guard pause. Even the distant call of a bird could briefly disturb the quiet. The watchman had to listen without becoming frightened by every sound. That was probably harder than it sounds. After all, staying awake is difficult when you have marched all day, helped build a camp, eaten a warm meal, and now have to stand outside while everyone else sleeps. Your comfortable pillow may suddenly seem like one of history's greatest inventions. Roman camps used organized systems of guard duty, although the exact routines could vary across different periods and military situations. Ancient writers describe watches during the night, but historians still debate how closely every army followed the ideal system during long or difficult campaigns. Conditions were not always perfect. Rain could fall. Cold wind could move through the camp. A tired guard might struggle to remain focused. Still, the soldiers understood why a watch mattered. Inside the tents, men slept beside their equipment. Outside, the guards protected the quiet order that had taken hours to build. The campfire light had become faint. Only a few glowing embers remained. The stars stretched above the camp, clear and distant. A watchman adjusted his cloak and continued walking. Perhaps he thought about home. Perhaps he counted the hours until his duty ended. Or perhaps he simply focused on staying awake. For the soldiers inside the tents, the guards' footsteps could become strangely comforting. Each slow pass meant that someone was still watching. Someone was awake. Someone was standing between the sleeping camp and the darkness beyond. You turned slightly beneath your cloak. The ground was still hard, but your tired body no longer seemed to care as much. The sounds outside blended together, the soft movement of guards, the distant breathing of animals, and the occasional rustle of the night wind. Then, little by little, those sounds became part of your sleep. The Roman camp remained quiet. The guards continued their slow walk, and beneath the stars, thousands of soldiers rested until the first light of morning. But the night was not always calm. Sometimes, cold rain, damp ground, and changing weather could make even the most exhausted soldier struggle to sleep. The Roman camp was quiet now. Most soldiers had fallen asleep beneath their cloaks, surrounded by leather tents, stacked equipment, and the faint sounds of the night. But sleeping outdoors was never the same as sleeping at home. For a tired Roman soldier, staying warm was often a matter of using whatever was available. A cloak could serve as clothing during the day and a blanket at night. It was practical, familiar, and probably one of the most useful things a soldier carried. Still, a cloak could only do so much. Cold air found its way inside. The ground remained hard. And if rain began, the night became much less comfortable. You might wake to the soft sound of drops touching the leather above you. At first, the rain was gentle. A quiet rhythm. Almost peaceful, then the ground outside became damp. Water collected in small areas, and the air grew colder. The smell of wet earth moved through the camp. Inside the tent, everyone shifted closer together. Nobody needed to say much. The cold made the decision for you. Sharing a tent could be uncomfortable during warm weather, but on a cold night, the nearby warmth of other soldiers may have been helpful. Personal space suddenly became less important. The soldier who had been snoring an hour earlier was still annoying. But at least he was warm. Roman soldiers faced many different climates during the empire's long history. Some campaigned beneath hot Mediterranean skies. Others traveled through rainy regions, cold mountains, or northern provinces where winter nights could be severe. The same military routine had to adapt to very different weather. The Roman camp was quiet now. Most soldiers had fallen asleep beneath their cloaks, surrounded by leather tents, stacked equipment, and the faint sounds of the night. But sleeping outdoors was never the same as sleeping at home. For a tired Roman soldier, staying warm was often a matter of using whatever was available. A cloak could serve as clothing during the day and a blanket at night. It was practical, familiar, and probably one of the most useful things a soldier carried. Still, a cloak could only do so much. Cold air found its way inside. The ground remained hard. And if rain began, the night became much less comfortable. You might wake to the soft sound of drops touching the leather above you. At first, the rain was gentle. A quiet rhythm. Almost peaceful. Then the ground outside became damp. Water collected in small areas, and the air grew colder. The smell of wet earth moved through the camp. Inside the tent, everyone shifted closer together. Nobody needed to say much. The cold made the decision for you. Sharing a tent could be uncomfortable during warm weather, but on a cold night, the nearby warmth of other soldiers may have been helpful. Personal space suddenly became less important. The soldier who had been snoring an hour earlier was still annoying. But at least he was warm. Roman soldiers faced many different climates during the empire's long history. Some campaigned beneath hot Mediterranean skies. Others traveled through rainy regions, cold mountains, or northern provinces where winter nights could be severe. The same military routine had to adapt to very different weather. Historians cannot know exactly how every soldier experienced these nights. Some camps may have offered better shelter. Some soldiers may have found ways to improve their sleeping spaces. Others may simply have endured the discomfort because there was no better option. And exhaustion helped. After a full day of marching and camp work, sleep could arrive even when conditions were far from perfect. You turned onto one side. A small stone pressed against your shoulder. You moved. Now the stone seemed to be beneath your hip. Apparently, the Roman army could build roads across continents, but it had not yet solved the ancient mystery of the traveling stone. Outside, the rain slowly weakened. The camp remained protected behind its defenses. Guards continued their watch, their footsteps occasionally passing through the darkness. Inside the tent, the soldiers became quiet again. The sound of breathing returned. The rain became softer. Your cloak felt heavy, but warm enough. And gradually, the discomfort faded into the background. You were still cold. The ground was still hard. Tomorrow would still begin early. But for now, the camp was safe. And somewhere between the gentle rain, the distant footsteps, and the tired breathing of the soldiers around you, sleep returned. Yet even when the body rested, the mind did not always become quiet. In the darkness, Roman soldiers may have remembered home, imagined tomorrow's march, or listened to the strange sounds drifting through the camp. And as the night grew deeper, dreams and distant memories began to fill the silence. The rain had passed. Outside the tent, the Roman camp had become quieter than before. The fires were almost gone, leaving only a few dim embers beneath the dark sky. You rested beneath your cloak. Your body was tired enough to sleep, but the mind did not always follow so easily. Even after a long day, thoughts could remain awake. Perhaps you remembered home. A familiar road. The sound of people talking outside a house. A warm meal shared with family. For soldiers serving far from home, these memories may have felt especially strong during the quiet hours of the night. We cannot know exactly what Roman soldiers dreamed about. Ancient evidence rarely tells us what an ordinary soldier thought while lying awake inside a crowded tent. But soldiers were people, not simply figures moving across a battlefield. They missed familiar places. They worried about the future. And sometimes, they may have wondered how long the campaign would last. You turned beneath your cloak and listened. The soldier beside you breathed slowly. Someone farther inside the tent moved and quietly adjusted a blanket. Then came the familiar sound again. Snoring. It rose gently through the darkness, stopped for a moment, and then returned. After several nights together, the soldiers may have become used to these sounds. In a strange way, they could become part of the camp's nightly routine. The sound of breathing meant your companions were nearby. The distant footsteps meant the guards were still awake. The quiet movement of animals meant the camp was alive, even while most of it slept. Beyond the tent, the night wind moved through the landscape. A horse shifted against its tether. Leather straps creaked softly. Somewhere in the distance, a guard called out to another watchman. Then everything became quiet again. For a moment, you opened your eyes. The inside of the tent was almost completely dark. You could only see faint shapes where equipment had been placed. Your shield rested nearby, exactly where you had left it. The familiar order of the camp offered a small sense of comfort. Everything was in its place. Your companions were beside you. The guards were watching. Morning had not arrived yet. So you closed your eyes again. Perhaps you dreamed of walking. After so many days on campaign, the rhythm of marching may have remained in your thoughts. One step after another. Roads disappearing beyond the horizon. The sound of sandals against the earth, or perhaps your dreams carried you somewhere peaceful, a town you remembered, a quiet home, or a place where the ground was soft and no one asked you to dig a defensive ditch before dinner. The night continued. Slowly. Quietly. The camp rested beneath the stars. And somewhere between memory and sleep, tomorrow began to feel very far away. But it was waiting. Before sunrise, the silence would end. A signal would sound through the camp. The soldiers would wake, gather their equipment, and prepare to leave. The Roman army would move again. The night did not last forever. Long before the sun appeared, the Roman camp began to wake. At first, there was only a small movement inside the tent. Someone turned beneath a cloak. Another soldier quietly reached for his belongings. Then, somewhere beyond the rows of tents, a signal sounded through the darkness. The new day had begun. You opened your eyes slowly. For a moment, you may not have remembered where you were. The tent was cold, the ground was hard, and the sky outside was still dark. Then the familiar sounds returned. Footsteps. Voices, the movement of equipment. The Roman army was waking. You pulled your cloak away and sat up. Your muscles felt stiff after sleeping on the ground. Your shoulders still carried the memory of yesterday's march, and your feet were probably not eager to begin another one. But the routine allowed little time for complaint. There was work to do. Your equipment had to be gathered. Your sleeping place had to be packed. The tent would eventually be taken down. And before the army moved, the soldiers needed something to eat. Breakfast was usually simple and practical. There was no long, relaxed morning meal beside a warm kitchen window. The army was preparing to travel. Food was meant to provide energy for the road ahead. As the first light appeared, the camp slowly changed. The quiet darkness gave way to movement. Fires were stirred. Animals were prepared. Soldiers checked their equipment. Leather straps were tightened, and familiar items returned to their proper places. Your shield was ready. Your belongings were packed. Your cloak was folded. Everything that had surrounded you during the night was now becoming part of the day's journey. The temporary camp that had taken hours to build would soon disappear. The tents would come down. The paths would become empty. The fires would fade. Only the marks left in the earth might show that thousands of soldiers had slept there. It was a strange rhythm. Each evening, the army created a small, organized world. Each morning, it packed that world away. Then it moved forward. Historians know that Roman armies followed organized routines, although the exact timing could vary depending on the campaign, season, location, and military situation. Some mornings may have been calm. Others may have been hurried. But for the ordinary soldier, the experience was likely familiar. Wake. Pack. Eat, prepare. March. You stood outside the tent and looked across the camp. The sky was becoming lighter. The cold air touched your face. Around you, thousands of soldiers prepared for another day. You were tired. But you were ready. Or at least, ready enough. The road waited beyond the camp. And soon, the sound of Roman sandals would return. Yet after so many nights of sleeping on hard ground, sharing crowded tents, and waking before sunrise, something unusual had begun to happen. The Roman soldier was learning to sleep almost anywhere, and that ability may have been one of the army's quietest strengths. As the first light spread across the Roman camp, you gathered your equipment and prepared to march again. The tent that had sheltered you through the night was coming down. The fire had almost disappeared. The ground where you had slept would soon be empty. And yet, after enough nights on campaign, this routine may have started to feel familiar. A Roman soldier could not choose where to sleep. One night, the camp might stand beside a quiet river. Another night, it could be built on a windy hill, a dry plain, or a cold stretch of unfamiliar land. The ground changed, the weather changed, but the routine remained. Build a camp. Eat. Arrange your equipment. Rest. Wait before dawn. Then continue. Over time, the body may have learned to adapt. The hard ground became less surprising. The sounds of nearby soldiers became familiar. Even the footsteps of the night watch could begin to feel comforting. For a modern person, sleeping in a crowded tent after marching all day might sound almost impossible. We're used to soft mattresses, warm rooms, and quiet spaces. A Roman soldier had none of those things. But he had routine, and routine can create a strange kind of comfort. When every evening followed a familiar pattern, the soldier knew what to expect. The camp might be temporary, but the habits were repeated again and again. The same equipment rested nearby. The same companions shared the tent. The same guards walked through the darkness. Perhaps this helped turn an unfamiliar landscape into something that felt almost like home. Not a comfortable home, certainly, but a familiar one. Historians cannot know whether every Roman soldier became equally skilled at sleeping during campaigns. Some may have struggled with cold, noise, or fear. Others may have fallen asleep almost immediately after a long march. But the Roman army depended on men who could recover quickly. Tomorrow's march required energy. Tomorrow's work required strength. And tomorrow's dangers required attention. Sleep was not treated as a luxury. It was part of the rhythm that allowed the army to continue. Night after night, the soldiers rested beneath the same wide sky. They slept beside their weapons. They listened to the wind beyond the camp walls. They woke before sunrise, and then they walked forward again. Perhaps that was one of the quiet strengths of the Roman army. Not only its roads, not only its weapons, not only its discipline, but its ability to carry familiar routines into unfamiliar places. To build a temporary home before nightfall, to rest for a few hours, and to rise again when morning came. Now the camp was ready to move. The soldiers formed their lines. The animals began walking. The first sounds of the march returned. You adjusted the weight of your equipment and took another step, then another. Behind you, the temporary camp slowly disappeared. Ahead, the road stretched toward another evening, another camp, and another night beneath the Roman sky. And now, as the Roman army moves farther along the ancient road, the sounds of the camp slowly begin to fade. The footsteps become quieter. The distant voices disappear. The leather tents, the small fires, and the long rows of soldiers grow faint beneath the wide evening sky. Somewhere ahead, another camp will be built before nightfall. The soldiers will place their equipment down once more. They will share another simple meal. They will settle beneath their cloaks and listen as the familiar sounds of the army slowly become part of the night. Perhaps the ground will be cold. Perhaps the wind will move softly across the camp. Perhaps a watchman will walk quietly beyond the tents, his footsteps passing through the darkness as thousands of tired soldiers rest. And little by little, the long day will drift away. The road will no longer matter. Tomorrow's march will remain somewhere beyond the horizon. For now, there is only the quiet camp, the soft night air, and the gentle glow of the final embers. You can imagine yourself lying beneath a simple Roman cloak, surrounded by the calm breathing of soldiers who have walked the same road beside you. Your equipment rests nearby. The camp walls stand quietly in the darkness. Above you, the stars remain unchanged. The Roman world is still awake somewhere beyond the camp. In distant towns, lamps shine behind small windows. Travelers move along quiet roads. Families gather around evening meals. But here, far from the noise of the cities, everything is becoming still. The soldiers rest because the morning will come soon enough. There will be another signal, another journey, another long road stretching toward an unknown horizon. But not yet. The night is still here. The fire is slowly fading. The wind moves gently across the grass, and the footsteps of the watchmen grow more distant with every passing moment. Soon, even those footsteps disappear. The camp becomes quiet. The ancient road becomes quiet. And beneath the same stars that once watched over Roman soldiers, the distant army slowly fades into the darkness, leaving only the soft feeling of a peaceful night and the quiet promise that somewhere beyond the horizon, morning will arrive when it is ready.